So in this section of the course, we're going to be talking about the automation of the deployment of virtual machines. Now within Microsoft Azure, the automation of virtual machines is usually done using ARM templates. As you know, ARM is the Azure Resource Manager model, which is the modern way of organizing and deploying resources into Azure. The opposite of ARM, of course, is the ASM model, which is the classic deployment model, which we don't use anymore. So when you do a deployment of a virtual machine, you usually get a screen like this saying your deployment is complete. Now we can see, if I actually go back to this particular resource group, we can see that I've done many different deployments to this resource group, but we're going to focus on the virtual machine one. Okay. Now, one of the options we get when we're looking at deployments is to look at the template. The template consists of two items. There's the template and there's the parameter file. We could download the template, which I'm going to do, and we're then also want to download the parameter file. Now, the scripts that are being presented, the CLI, PowerShell, .NET, and Ruby, only exist so that we can execute this template. These are not the PowerShell equivalents of the template. They don't replace the template. They basically require the template. Let's look at what has been downloaded. So I'm going to click it to open it. And if I bring it back into frame, you can see that it's got the template, the parameter file, and it has a PowerShell, a CLI, Ruby, and some C# code in order to deploy it. So there's 4 different methods to deploy it built into this zip file. We're going to open up these files and we're going to look into them, and we'll try to explain how an ARM template is organized, and to the requirement of the exam, how do you modify the ARM template. So here we can see inside the template.json file. Remember, we have both a template and a parameters file. Now the template JSON file is in the format of a JSON file, of course. The first property is the $schema property. This schema refers to the deployment template.json URL, and that's a required field. Now the version number is a version number that you can control. So you can see here that Microsoft gives us version 1.0.0.0. But if you wanted to check this into a source repository, if you wanted to use this template as the baseline for your environment and then make changes to it, you can increment this version number so that you'll know which file is the most recent, etc. There's also a parameters file. There appear to be about 20 or so parameters being passed, and we'll review them when we get into the parameters JSON. Variables are similar to parameters, but you can see that these are basically computed fields. So the deployment template is actually taking a resource group function and the name of the resource group this is being deployed in, and constructing a virtual network ID based off that. So this is basically a area where variables are constructed. They're not input from external. The key section here is the resources section. Now this is where all of the resources within this deployment get defined. We're going to look into that in a little bit more detail in the next video. I'm going to scroll down here. The last section is the outputs. And so once everything's been created, this ARM template is going to be able to return the admin username as its output, even though that's a parameter that's being passed as input. But this is the verification that this works. Okay, so this is the basic overview of what an ARM template looks like. If we flip over to the parameters file, we can see that there's going to be one parameter for each of the parameters defined by the template. So the template has a location parameter, which is a string, and in the parameters file, the location is being sent to Central US. Now, the way that it's got these values is that when we created this resource within the Azure portal, we chose Central US as the location. Azure portal created a new virtual network interface name for us, and we accepted it. We could have changed it, and that got set into here as well. So all the values in here basically come from our selections, our choices as we were creating the resource in the portal. Now, that's the basic overview of the ARM template. In the next video, we're going to look at editing this and then being able to do deployments based on our edits.